Welcome, welcome, welcome. How's everybody doing tonight? Guys, you are my crew. I was a little nervous because it's the day before a holiday weekend, but you are dedicated to the arts, my friend. So give yourself a round of applause. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So welcome back to the Montclair Film StorySLAM. I'm Jennifer Cambris. I'm the Director of Production and Special Projects here at Montclair Film. Tonight is our final StorySLAM of the season, so we'll be taking a little break over the summer and back at the end of August. Thank you for coming out tonight and joining us. The bar is open. Look at our lovely bartenders over there. Give them a wave, guys. I'm just going to be giving some housekeeping notes and some announcements about our scheduling, so feel free to just get up and continue getting your drinks while I do that. Before I introduce your host for the evening, I have a special announcement about our programming over the next month. If you're looking for something to do over the long weekend, be sure to check out our great lineup of films at the screenings across the street at the Claridge. There's something for everybody with The Little Mermaid, You Hurt My Feelings, to NY Times Critics Pick, like It Ain't Over, and Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. On Saturday, June 3rd, we begin our sensory-friendly screenings with The Little Mermaid at 10 a.m. We'll adjust the sound and lighting to those with sensory issues so everyone can enjoy the film on the big screen. On Saturday, June 10th, after the Montclair Pride Festival, please join us at the Claridge for the Rocky Horror Picture Show with the Ordinary Kids pre-show with a special performance for Pride. And just so everybody knows, we do have them there once a month. So it's usually the second Saturday of each month, the first Saturday of each month. On June 20th at 7:30 at the Claridge, we have a special screening of Taylor Mack's 24-decade history of popular music. Following the film, we will have a Q&A with directors Rob Epstein and Jeffrey Friedman, producers Linda Brombach, and one of our lovely judges, Joel Stillerman, and star Taylor Mack. In our education department, summer classes for grades 6 through 12 are filling up fast. We also have spots available in our summer adult mini camp in case you're interested in having fun and learning a new skill this summer. I'm going to go off script for 1 second. It feels right that with tonight's theme, I do need to acknowledge, can Sue Hollenberg please raise her hand? Where is she? She's in the back. Sue Hollenberg is our Director of Education. Sorry, Sue, I had to. For those of you who don't know, the Montclair Film Education is the backbone of who Montclair Film is. We have an incredible Director of Education to thank for that. Her Rolodex of, this is me talking now, her Rolodex of industry colleagues and friends have led us to having some of the most talented people in the area teaching our classes, along with another one of our judges tonight. If you've been on the fence about trying something new, I do encourage you to take a look at what we have to offer. We're really excited to be part of this year's North to Shore Festival. On June 24th, please join us at NJ Pack for an evening with Stephen Colbert and Jim Gaffigan. There are limited tickets left, so please don't wait. And if you happen to be in Atlantic City the weekend of June 8th, come on down and join us. We're going to be running the film portion of the festival. We'll be hosting the opening night party with Joe McGinty in the Losers Lounge, and we're presenting exciting films, both indoor and outdoor screenings. You can find the full schedule at montclairfilm.org. Please make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for up-to-date announcements and for our films and events. Please note your fire exits on your right and left, and the restrooms are to your left and outside of the door. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to your host for the evening, Duncan Miller. He is our storytelling teacher and coach here at Montclair Film. Duncan is a former actor and improviser who has performed at the Second City and Improv Olympic in Chicago. He studied theater at Ithaca College and has performed at various theaters and festivals in New York City, Chicago, and Baltimore prior to earning his master's degree in education. Currently, he teaches high school government and politics in Newark, helping to build the next generation of changemakers. Please welcome Duncan Miller.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, everyone. I'm very excited to be your host tonight. Let's get it started with who has been here before for a StorySLAM. Show of hands, please. Welcome back. Round of applause for our veterans. Thank you for coming back. And there's a lot of fresh faces. Who has never been to a StorySLAM before? Yes, even one of our volunteers? Yes, welcome. Round of applause for our first timers. Thank you for coming out. We are so truly lucky to have 3 community members, people who are professionals in the industry, to be our judges for tonight. So the first thing we have to do is make sure you know who's actually in charge tonight, the 3 people here up front. This is a very stiff competition. The prize is Montclair Film swag. So storytellers, brush up. We're gonna get ready to dive in, but first let's meet our storytelling judges. First up is Marie Spiegland. Marie teaches at Passaic Public Schools. Before becoming an educator, she had a 10-year career in the entertainment industry, including with New Regency Productions, Walt Disney Company, Warner Bros., Focus Features. She even worked with artists including Jay-Z, John Legend, Mariah Carey, and Prince. She is currently also an educator here at Montclair Film, teaching filmmaking. She lives in Verona with her husband and 2 boys. Welcome, Marie. Let's give it up. Next up on the far end, we have Martha Little. Martha is a senior director of creative development at Audible. She oversees the commissioning and production of Audible investigative documentaries and nonfiction episodic series. She has worked with talent ranging from Martin Sheen to Steph Curry to Queen Latifah. She started her audio career at major American public radio outlets, including NPR, APM, PR, PRI, news director at WBUR, or as she called it, the alphabet soup of public radio. Her work has been recognized by such awards as the Peabody, the Gracie, and Edward R. Burrow. Martha has also helped to create Audible's podcast development program, which offers development, audio production, writing, and marketing support to talented storytellers from around the world. Martha serves as the secretary of the executive board of the Podcast Academy, the host of the Ambie Awards. When not producing, Martha is busy reviving her college tennis career and lives with her 13-year-old dog, Lola, in Montclair. Let's welcome Martha. And our third and final judge on the end here is Joel Stillerman. Joel is a veteran producer and creative executive known for his work in television and film. He's held major positions such as chief content officer at Hulu, president of original programming at AMC and the Sundance Channel, and currently serves as chairman of Content Superba. His notable credits include overseeing acclaimed shows like The Handmaid's Tale, Mad Men, Breaking Bad, The Walking Dead, and Better Call Saul, as well as producing iconic films like Rounders and Blow. Welcome, Joel. Let's give it up. All right, storytellers, the rules of engagement for tonight. You will have a 6-minute time slot to tell your wonderful story. The illustrious Jennifer here will be giving you your time cues when she holds up a green card. That is halfway through 3 minutes. A yellow card means you have 1 minute left, you're 5 minutes in, and the red card is our version of the Apollo stick. You are finished. Please wrap it up at that red card. The only real rule tonight is to please be on theme. We also want to make sure that in the friendly competition, we let you know there is a deliberation for about 15 minutes. Our judges will head upstairs. We'll have time to hit the bar one more time and wait for our judges to finish up. There is no intermission, but there is a slight shift tonight. We had 2 people quit on us last minute. That's okay, because you're ready. We usually open up 1 slot if the theme has moved you and you're ready to tell an impromptu story. Tonight, we're gonna open it up to 2 possible storytellers. So if you are moved by the first series of storytellers, you're gonna come check in with us right before we deliberate. We'll make sure we'll get you up there and we will include you in our storytelling event for tonight. If you need liquid courage to do said storytelling, we also have a slight Memorial Day discount at the bar. Drinks are now $5 instead of $6. This is a nonprofit, so that's a big deal. Please make sure that if you're gonna volunteer, you help yourself out, but you will need to be on theme, which means we should tell the theme. The theme tonight is life's teachings. Teacher appreciation should really be more than a week. So we are here together tonight to hear stories about formative people and events that taught us these unforgettable life lessons. Your time in the classroom shapes your worldview, and it helps you become who you were meant to be. So tonight, let's hear the reflections about how educators and schools shape the futures of these amazing storytellers. Storytellers, feel free to move the mic, get comfortable up here as you come up. Let's jump in with our very first storyteller. Let's give a warm round of applause for Michael Kovacs. Welcome, Michael.
I'd like to dedicate tonight's story to a dear friend and mentor of mine who passed away like 6 weeks ago. A friend of mine named Greg went away far too early, and this is for him because he was amazing. This is beautiful. What do you want to do with it? It's early 1994, and I am standing in front of the door to the office of Professor Noel DaCosta, renowned composer and teacher at Rutgers University. I've driven there the morning after an ice storm to see him. I'm in my Sunday best, and I have my cache of classical compositions in my hand, and I need help. I'm about to have a seizure, but I gotta talk to this man. So pulling up all my courage, I knock and he opens the door, and there is Professor DaCosta, as I remembered him from a few years ago. But 5'10", elegant, dignified gentleman, half Nigerian, half Jamaican, had a presence of absolute certainty and kindness and center. He was a lovely guy. So he goes, yes, and then this was the following that shot out of my mouth, more or less. Hi, Professor DaCosta, this is Michael Kovacs. You remember me from a few years ago, but we used to talk a lot, and I'm trying to get back into grad school for composition, so could you please, would you look over my work? I just needed a couple of pointers, would you mind? That was slower than I did it, but I was so nervous, so he was like, well, oh yeah, I remember you, Michael, yes, can I see your work? So he just takes and he's flipping through, and there's a student, and so this is not gonna last long. Oh, this is okay. Do you have anything new? And I'm like, yeah, yes, Professor, I'm working on a classical piece for nylon string guitar, soprano, and the verse of 159 from the Psalms. Well, that's, okay, here, take this back. Why don't you come next Friday at 4 o'clock and to my office, and we'll look it over. And thank you very much. Thank you so much. Sorry to bother you. Dunk. Now, I'm ecstatic that I'm asked back. However, I am now panicked because he called my bluff. There is no piece. I have nothing. But oh, too bad now. Sparky, get in there. Now, in the classical world, there is this thing called the 12-tone system of composition. Anybody know it? 1, that's how, 2, that's how popular it is. And has always been, it will be. If you don't know it, I will not get into the theory of it. I can describe it as music as composed by three cats having a seizure on a piano. Okay, but not as nice. It never caught on for a reason, okay? But that's the style you have to write in to get into grad school. So I dutifully go home and I'm like, no, writing in this style that I was trained in and I hate, no. So I go back in and he looks it over and we catch up and he looks over the piece and, okay, good, then it's not quite done. He goes, well, finish it up and come back in next week. I'm like, thank you, Professor DaCosta. All right, I'm coming in next week. All right, come back in. I keep coming back. He keeps saying, come back again next week with another piece. So a couple weeks in, I was waiting for him, and I was depressed because I was in my 20s, and I just dumped out this melody on the piano, and I'm like, oh, that's perfect. I can use this. But it wasn't a cat seizure, it was a melody. And so I put it in my notebook and I go in and we have the lesson, we talk, and so he starts doing the piece. And it's done. I hate it, but it's done, and he's very nice. So then he goes, do you have anything new? And I'm like, well, I have this. And I show him the melody. And so he goes, let me see. And he puts it up on the piano, and he goes, and he plays it. He's like, oh, that's really beautiful. What do you want to do with it? And it was not a cat seizure. It was actually a nice melody. But the thing was, no teacher, no art teacher, no music comp teacher ever said what I did was beautiful. A 0. And this man just was like, yeah, this is beautiful. What do you want to do? And my world changed. I was sincerely giving everything I had, and then he doubled down and went, what do you want to do with it? It wasn't like, well, Mr. Kovacs, I think you should probably do it. It was like, what do you want to do with it? And I went, I'd like to write a string quartet. Okay, start it, bring it in next week. It changed my life. He just kept me rolling. He demanded with his kindness and his presence, never raising his voice, just being a beautiful human being. He demanded I be honest. And I was afraid he was going to tell me I was horrible and have me to get out. Wouldn't have been the first time. But he demanded the best of me every time I was in that class. And I carried that with me every day. And end of the semester, I thanked him and we parted, and it changed me. I had belief. Now, a few years, so I'd see him on and off at the campus, because I'd go there, I'd go to the music library, rehearse with the cello player. And I'd thank him. I'd go, thank you. I'd say, oh, Professor DaCosta, thank you so much. But whatever, didn't thank him enough. Then in 2002, I was at a cafe in New Brunswick, and I found out that he had died of colon cancer. And I was devastated. The guy told me, and I almost punched him. Like, what do you mean? And I was like, I floored it home, and I went, and there's the New York Times obituary. Noel DaCosta, composer, dead at 82. And I cried in ways I couldn't imagine. The only way I could thank him was simply doing what he did. I've been a teacher for 35 years. And ever since him, I wanted to be what he was. I wanted to make sure that everybody was honest, that I gave to them and there was a safe place to create. And by doing that, I could thank him over and over and over for the noble, dignified, wonderful human being that he was. And to all you teachers out there, like Professor DaCosta, you may have done a miracle today and not known it, because I don't think he really remembered what happened. You may have done a miracle today, and you may do a miracle tomorrow and not know it. But keep getting out there and doing it. Even if you never know it, it may have happened. God bless. Take care.
Yes, let's keep it going for Michael Kovacs. Thank you, Michael. Beautiful. Love that question. What do you want to do with it? That was the gift, right? That he said you created something beautiful, but what next? Didn't let you sit back just because it was great. Thank you for sharing that. All right, what a great tone to start us off on. We're going to keep it going. Let's welcome up to the stage Helen Lipman. Give it up for Helen.
Hi, everyone. So this story it's an essay, and I have a book coming out. It's called To Newark with Love, and this story is one of the stories in it. So, with no further ado, I call it He Said. Let me ask you something, the HR manager said, as he kind of narrowed his eyes and peered over his glasses at me. Do you have to work? Those 5 words changed me forever. I didn't start out as a feminist. When I was in high school, I went steady with a high school dropout. Soon after, I dropped out, not out of high school, but out of a college prep course. I started taking business, and my whole career goal, it's memorialized in my yearbook, was to be a secretary. So I achieved it about a year after graduating. I had a humdrum job at a major insurance company in downtown Newark, where I lived at the time, and I got a job at a small manufacturing firm over the river, on the other side of the river in East Newark, and it was as a private secretary, and it came with a 50% hike in pay. So I was psyched. But not long after, this is where I had my first brush with kind of women's rights. The issue was office attire. This was maybe 67 by then. I'm not sure the year, 67, 68. Mini skirts were in. And I was young, as were a couple of my office colleagues, and we wore them short. Nobody said anything. You could wear your skirts as short as you wanted, as long as they were skirts or dresses. No pants in the office, because, after all, the female backside was considered too provocative. The men would have a hard time concentrating on work. So I asked my boss a couple of times, to no avail. I was by then working for the guy who was vice president of the division. And then a friend of mine who was actually unionized. It was a union office and union plant, but because I was an executive secretary, I was exempt from the union. But she started protesting kind of wordlessly. She went out and bought this long, drab, gray maxi skirt, like down to her ankles. She kept it in her locker, and she wore it every day, increasingly bedraggled and scruffy looking. I think it must have gone on for about a month. And I guess management noticed, because they finally relented. So the new dress code was women can wear pants, but they have to be either pantsuits or pants with a long tunic top, because after all, no tush showing exposed in the office. So that was it. Shortly after that, I was kicked upstairs, actually by an older woman, not a younger woman, My boss at the time sent for his secretary from his former division. She came in, and I got to be the sales secretary. So I worked with 3 men, Andy, Sandy, and Bud. We all shared an office, a big office, and they were very nice. And I'm sure they were smart enough. They were college grads. They had either engineering or technical background, because it was technical sales. But boy, their reports were semi-literate. And I had to type them, but I did way more than type them. I was always good at grammar, and I, rewrote them, made them sound really intelligent. And it was around that time where I started figuring out to myself, like, okay, Helen, if you want to use your brain, you probably have to go to college. After swearing, I was not going. So one night after work, I drove over the Clay Street Bridge into downtown Newark. It was very close by to Rutgers, Newark, and I enrolled in a couple of courses. And that was the beginning of my college career. I never took SATs because this was the cusp of the 70s with all the protests and the Kent State and all of that, and they just had open enrollment, and so I was in. So while I was in college, my career goals shifted a couple of times. First, I thought I'd major in psychology. Then I found the textbook horrible, and I decided to become an English major because I could read all this great literature instead of textbook. And then I thought I'll be a teacher. And then professors started telling me I was a good writer, and so gradually I came to realize I wanted to be a writer. In the meantime, I met the man who was, he was my first husband in college. I had 2 kids while I was going nights and part-time after I stopped working full-time. And it was 1978, and I got my bachelor's degree, and I decided to go to grad school. And the only writing program around that was part-time was at NYU. It was a journalism program. So I applied. Again, I didn't take GREs. I have no idea why. And I got in. But I had a 2-year window. And NYU was rather expensive, so I thought, and plus it was New York, and my kids were little. I thought, okay, maybe I'll get a job for a year or 2. So that's how I ended up meeting this HR manager. So the job, I don't recall the name of the company, but it was a big firm downtown Newark on Broad Street. And I go there, and the job was, I think, to write and produce an in-house newspaper. And I met with the man who I think was either getting promoted or leaving, whose job I would have taken. And we hit it off fabulously. I mean, I got what he was saying. I had some ideas. He liked me. And with that, I walked into the HR manager feeling rather elated until this sort of portly gentleman comes out with this question. And I was so shocked. I repeated, I said, do I have to work? Like, I could hear myself getting furious. I just knew. I was like, what? He didn't know everything about me, but he knew I had just finished a bachelor's degree, that I was going part-time. I had actually written on my application that the reason I left my last full-time job 5 years ago was because of childbirth, so he knew I had a kid. But this was like 1978. I didn't think that would matter, but haha. So he did not know the extent of it. I mean, I was so dedicated to school that I went to class. I was 9 months pregnant. We had just moved to a new house. I had a 2-year-old kid. And I went to class not knowing I was having the beginnings of labor. My water broke in school. I drove myself home with this sopping wet from this amniotic fluid and got my husband and got my parents over, and we went to the hospital. We got there at 10:30. I had left school at 9, and Diane was born at 11:30. So he didn't know this. He couldn't, but still, he had knew enough. So at any rate, I did not get the job. You won't be surprised to hear that. But I did learn a lasting lesson. For me, it was women with young kids are not welcome in the workforce. And not that I was going to stop wanting to work, but I never again said anything remotely their husband or child until I had a job. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Helen Lippman. Let's keep it going for Helen. You don't have to be a soon-to-be published author or a composer to tell a story tonight. We're still looking for two. Helen, what's the name of your book? To Newark with Love. City Family Life. And when is it coming out? Okay. Find it anywhere you find books? All right. To Newark with Love. Thank you for sharing that. All right. No, plug away. That's why we're here. Spread that love and community. Thank you. All right. We're going to keep it going with our third storyteller for tonight. Let's welcome to the stage Delaney Rotter. Welcome up, Delaney.
Hello. All right. So, although I grew up as a gifted kid, I took multiple AP classes throughout high school, and I was super involved. School was never really my thing. One of my best friends in high school was our valedictorian, and education was just like her purpose. She went on to Stanford University, where I'm sure she'll rank at the top of her class once again, and go on to further her education. I, with my 2.8 high school GPA, went on to a public local university where I ambitiously chose to major in legal studies. I had long-term goals of going to law school. This ended up working to my eventual detriment when the pandemic began and my mental health began to deteriorate. Unfortunately, spending hours reading legal suits over and over and annotating the annotations that were already written on them was just not motivating me, I guess, the way I thought it would. My grades suffered heavily, and I found myself in the same position as I did in high school, which was chronically comparing myself to others around me, feeling as though my grades reflected on who I was as a person and not knowing what was really guaranteed for me in the future. At the end of my sophomore year, after talking to some of my professors and my advisor at the time, who was never available and honestly no help, I switched my major to psychology in the hopes that it would ease the tension between me and my education's relationship. Rather than dreams of going to law school, I chose to make my purpose achieving my master's degree in counseling. With a new major, I was assigned a new advisor, Dr. Kate Makarick, who I avoided scheduling a meeting with due to fear of being reprimanded for failing my classes. I fought with myself internally for a summer and began my junior year newly motivated and for once honestly looking forward to school and routine and my future. I went in with a plan that was soon ripped up as I developed a medical issue and quickly fell behind in class once again. Not only was Dr. Makarick my advisor, but she was also my professor for experimental psychology, so she just got to watch my mental decline with some 3D glasses on from all perspectives of life. It became harder and harder to turn in my assignments on time as they piled up, and the easier option just seemed to be to cave into my self-hatred and just let myself fail. I thought that I realized that I will never be qualified for a master's degree, and I will never be as successful as my Stanford and my NYU friends. Until one day, Dr. Makarick began her routine of checking in on me. It started with one email to ask just what was going on with me, and then as she was receiving alerts from my professors saying that they were concerned about my standing in the class. Eventually, it became pretty constant emails, making sure I was remaining consistent with my coursework. They went from bi-weekly to almost daily, and instead of turning in my assignments on time because it was in the curriculum and, like I truly cared about my education, I was turning them in just to avoid Dr. Makarick getting another email about me because I cared more about not upsetting her with my failure. But it was working, so I kept it up. After some time, I decided to visit her during her office hours to discuss my standing and my degree. As earlier that week, I hit a major low point in my life, and I said the two words my mom was dreading to hear, dropping out. Dr. Makarick and I talked about where I started versus where I was at the time, and I found myself letting go and breaking down in her office. I cried and I cried about how unsure I was of my educational career and how it just seemed like all of my ambitions were failing, and it wasn't the only time that I would cry in her office about this. Fortunately for me, I was breaking down in front of someone who didn't think of me the way that I thought of me. And she told me how, even though I was not on the road to study for my PhD at Harvard University, what mattered more was that I reached a point where I was happy with what I had done. She said, the reality is that I'm not ready to study for my master's degree, which was the total opposite of what literally everyone at school was telling me. So it was extremely uncomfortable to hear, but strangely, confusingly reassuring to know that it was okay that school wasn't my purpose and that there was more to me than introducing myself as a student, which was all I knew. I left her office that day with a new perspective on my degree. Rather than working with the intention of continuing my education, I was honestly just working to get to the end. I felt an enormous weight lifted off my shoulders, and I still struggled with my classes for the next year and a half, and Dr. Mackerick still received emails about my late assignments, but they weren't as often, and I found myself actually catching up. Plus, after every red flag email, she would sign off with, P.S. I look forward to seeing you walk at graduation. Next week, she will be sitting in the audience, just as she said she would as I received my degree in psychology, with 2 minors and a GPA above a 3.0, which I truly never thought I would see again. And Dr. Mackerick will hopefully know how big of a part she played in what is now proudly my biggest achievement. And she's actually here tonight to support me. So thank you, Dr. Mackerick.
Wow, let's keep it going for Delaney. I see a couple tears in the audience. Thank you so much. What a beautiful success story. And thank you, Doctor, for being here. I'm sure that's not the first person whose life you've changed, so thank you very much. Wow. Let's take a breath, yes? I have learned so much from bad teachers as well, right? And we think about the people who've, not even just teachers, right? Managers, bosses, leading you on how not to lead, teaching you on how not to teach. And I think those are really valuable too. And so we have to find those people who really do take us in the right direction. So thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful. All right. This person actually came to their first Story Slam and volunteered to tell a story. But she signed up tonight, so we're really excited to have her back. Let's welcome to the stage Deb Weber. Come on up, Deb.
Well, teachers, as we know, are miracle workers. Middle school teachers, oh my goodness. You have kids that are in a new school for the first time, you have cliques, you have puberty, and you have the navigation of going to different classrooms from homeroom. So one of the classes we had to navigate to in junior high, because that's what it was called in my day, was called home economics, home ec for short. Now this was a huge double room, and it had, one room was like full of sewing machines, cutting tables, cubbies for your, projects, and the other room was sinks, stoves, prep tables, refrigerators for cooking. So we sewed the first half of the school year, we learned how to cook the second half. The boys, meanwhile, were in shop, but whatever. Anyway, so some of the girls, well, most of the girls had in those days, their moms or their grandmas would sew clothes for them, dresses and such, and they were very enthusiastic about home ec. Now, my mother did not sew. It was a mystery to me, and I was full with abject terror. I just was terrified. So the first thing, Mrs. Caffarella was our teacher, the first thing she did was take our measurements and yell them out to the volunteer butt-kissing student scribe down the hall. And we were to take these measurements and go shopping for a paper pattern for a jumper and fabric. And so my mom and we had no clue. So her best friend, Harriet, said she would take us. So we went, we picked out a pattern according to the measurements, we got the fabric, we came back to school, and we began. I was a disaster from the start. I had trouble, the 2-dimensional paper pattern to the 3-dimensional garment, I was lost. And then the sewing machine, oh my God. I could never get it threaded right, and I would start to sew, and then the threads would just jumble up into a bird's nest. And so then I would ask for help. And Mrs. Caffarella would roll her eyes and come over, hunch over my machine and me, and hiss in my ear with her cigarette breath and say, "You're really terrible at this, aren't you?" Well, I was truly terrible, and I fell behind, and all the other girls were already cooking. And I was alone in the sewing half of the room, still struggling with my jumper. Now, at the end of the school year, there was also a fashion show that was held. All the girls would model their outfits for the entire school in an assembly, and it was judged by the women's club, and they would, give out prizes and such. But I was ineligible in 7th grade because I was still in the sewing room with trying to get the zipper in the back of this jumper, and all the other girls were cooking. And I ended the school year with a D. Now, that was the lowest grade I had ever gotten. And my parents never had to talk to me about the grade thing because from birth, I was a neurotic, self-punishing overachiever. And I vowed that I would never get a D again. So that summer, we knew the next year that our projects had to be more complicated than a jumper. So Harriet coached me on her sewing machine so I could get a little bit better at that. And she took my measurements, allowed for adolescent growth, and we went shopping and we got a pattern for a skirt, a jacket. It was a suit, a fully lined suit with a Nehru collar because it was 1968. And I picked out a beautiful yellow wool and yellow acetate lining and a little yellow zipper for the skirt and went to school. And the first thing Mrs. Caffarella said is, "That's no good, it's a diagonal print." Well, diagonal prints are notoriously difficult to match on side seams, but there was no print. This was solid. It had a diagonal slub in the weave. That was it. So I knew she was playing me, and I stuck to my choice. She rolled her eyes again, and off we went. But now I had a trick. Well, it wasn't a trick. It was something I decided to do. After every class, I took the instruction sheet from the pattern home with me, and I studied it. I knew what the next thing would be in class, the next section. And I studied the drawings, and I memorized the instructions. And I would come back in, and I would be able to keep up with the other girls. So I was able to cook at the same time that the other girls cooked. Oh, but sidebar, the recipes, thank God I missed this in 7th grade. She had us make cornmeal mush, and then refried cornmeal mush with the leftovers, broiled grapefruit with brown sugar on top, and the pièce de résistance, put raisins in lasagna. The entire class rebelled, and some of us went so far as to question her Italian heritage, and she'd say, "Oh, that's the gourmet way." But I digress. So I finished my yellow suit at the same time as the other girls. I was able to model in the fashion show, and I won a pair of pinking shears from the women's club, and I got an A. Now, somewhere along the line of learning all this sewing and being so terrified, I actually began to enjoy the process. So much so that my parents bought me a sewing machine for my birthday that year, and I was hooked. I was making little halter tops, I was making tote bags, and I took over the alterations my mother used to job out to Dottie Stavola next door. I was doing all of that, working for community theater, and then when I went to college, I was a theater major, and I got a job, work study, in the costume shop, where I met a wonderful teacher, Barry Odom, who taught me so much that I was able to get a job after graduation at the New York Public Theater, Shakespeare in the Park, as a dresser, where I met my mentor, my supervisor who hired me, Lonnie, who then hired me for a Broadway show. I was able to join my beloved union, IATSE, and I just retired after 50 years of sewing for theater, TV, and film. So here's the thing. You don't know where your inspiration comes from. Sometimes it's spite, you know? It can totally be spite. So I'm not sure if she actually inspired me or if she double dog dared me to succeed, but I present Exhibit A, the yellow suit, and my kinking shears. So I would like to thank you, Mrs. Caffarella, wherever you are. I hope you rest in pieces, pattern pieces, and I thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, keep it going for Deb. Thank you, Deb Weber. Love a story with props. Thank you so much for bringing your props tonight. I also did costume crew in college. They just let me pick up stuff on the tallest shelf. That was it. Like, you can go in the back room. Thank you. I am terrible at sewing. Maybe not anymore. All right. What a wonderful halfway point. We're going to keep it going. If you're feeling brave and emboldened, get ready, get ready. We're going to ask for volunteers and just a couple more stories. So I hope you're ready to share. Let's give it up right now for Brooke Hoover. Welcome, Brooke.
Hey, y'all. A teacher never stops teaching you, even when they're no longer your teacher. So my 6th grade year, I am rudely uprooted to a snobby new school where I have to wear uniforms. And I prefer wearing bows and Birkenstocks. I still do. And I worry that nobody at this new school will ever understand someone like me. Brooke, do you want a donut? I hear that right behind me, and I turn around and I see this nice man, a teacher, holding a box of donuts open for me. I have no clue how he knows my name, but I will later learn that it's because he's part magical being. And he's gesturing to like the pink frosted one. And because I'm a little chubby and already concerned about my weight at the age of 11, and because I'm shy, I say, no, thank you. And then I make my way to first period. And I go and sit down, and I see a bulletin board. And on the bulletin board, it says, why be normal, ? Except it's hung upside down, right? And I smile to myself because I immediately feel somewhat understood by this person who wrote this bulletin board. And boys and girls in uniforms walk in, and I'm wearing my bows and Birkenstocks while they're wearing like matching hairdos and matching book sacks and matching shoes. And then the teacher walks in, he kind of glides right in, and it's the same teacher who had just offered me the donut. And he introduces himself as Mr. Tibergen, but he says, you can call me Mr. T. And he has like a silver hair, page boy kind of haircut. He's very slender, and he has like a puck-like nature. He's a gay man, but he wants to be called Mr. T, like the pop culture icon. And I'm sure our Mr. T also does pity the fool. So this is science class, right? And it's my least favorite subject. But Mr. T, who's also the school's drama director, makes science fun. Something that we did one day was daiquiri day. A bunch of 11-year-old kids making daiquiris, virgin daiquiris. Well, we're in South Louisiana, so they may have had alcohol in them. But he's teaching us science experiments about combining, about following directions, about portions. I actually don't really know if it had any scholastic merit, but it was fun. And he had the parents over. My mom was one of the volunteers. And my mom and Mr. T became fast friends. And a few weeks later, we decided to have like a 6th grade soiree at my house to kind of help me make some friends. And Mr. T is invited as kind of like the guest of honor, like the incentive for people to come to like Weird New Brooks' little party. And Mr. T is line dancing with all of us till the wee hours. Mr. T, being the drama director, for some reason, I might be a shy kid, but I love being on stage, and Mr. T saw that. So he invites me to audition for the school musical called Christmas on Angel Street. And I sing my heart out badly. I dance my feet off, and I land myself the part of a featured dancer chorus member. The next year, I auditioned for this musical number that they're having at like this events center in St. Francisville, Louisiana called Hemmingbow. And we have to come in as our favorite musical theater character. Now, I don't know anything about musical theater yet, but I do know a lot of Barbara Streisand, thanks to my mom. So I show up in one of my mom's long green dresses. She puts my hair in an updo, and we kind of do a cat eye. And I waltz into the audition room singing a medley of People, Papa, Can You Hear Me, and Don't Rain on My Parade. I will save y'all from that song. And I could see Mr. T smiling and taking notes furiously. The next day, the cast list goes up, and I'm sure I'm going to get something good. But I don't see my name assigned to any musical number. But I look back up, and I see my name and my best friend Heather Clark's name, and we are assigned as MCs of the night, as Helen and Gertie, the crazy Southern grandmas. So Mr. T essentially created a role for me because he saw, while I didn't have much musical talent, I had a lot of chutzpah. And to this day, I'm an actor, and I like to thank Mr. T every time I show up in an audition room without sometimes knowing what the heck I'm doing, because he taught me that sometimes all of it's just about showing up. I should mention, y'all, that none of us like talking about this, who were his students or his friends, like my mom. Mr. T's life was taken from him way too early in a hate crime. He passed away my junior year of high school. But we will not, none of us students will let Mr. T be known as the teacher who made front page of The Advocate. He's the teacher who had daiquiri day to teach a bunch of 11-year-olds about science. He's the teacher who had 5 Broadway quality shows at our school a year. And he's the teacher who made a girl in bows and Birkenstocks feel like she had a place in the world. And y'all, one major lesson I learned from him is that when someone offers you a pink frosted donut, you should always say yes. Thank y'all so much.
All right, let's keep it going for Brooke. And let's give it up for Mr. T. Thank you very much. It's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing. Very vulnerable tonight. Thank you. Does the bar have tissues? No? Sorry. Just to bring it full circle and to lighten the mood, I taught science my second year of teaching because I needed a contract. And my wife asked me, like, you were terrible in science. And I said, I've seen Breaking Bad, I'm good. Literally how I framed my thinking around teaching science. It was 7th grade science, everyone. They're fine. They're college graduates. All right, we have 2 more on the list, but 2 more in our hearts out there. I'm excited to hear yours. Let's give it up for Carl Kelch. Come on up, Carl.
So, when I started Catholic elementary school in 1st grade, sex ed wasn't really a thing yet. But by the time I was in 5th grade at that same school, our class was the first class to be taught the new family life curriculum. And this was something that was going on in public schools already, but for our school, this was new territory, and some parents were not having it, including mine. So that first day when that bell rang for family life class, I and 3 other of my fellow classmates were unceremoniously escorted down to the library where we sat for that period because our parents decided to opt us out of the class. Yes, my parents had sat me down and they said, look, this is because we believe we should be the ones to teach you about sex. It's not for the school, it's for us. So I would go to school, I would come home and eat dinner, I'd do my homework, and I would wait for a lesson that never came because I think my parents meant, we'll teach you when we think you're ready, which turned out to be never. I'm not sure exactly what they hoped to achieve with that. I think this was like an early attempt at puberty blockers, like pre-science. So basically, I'd sit at that library and I'd have plenty of time to reflect on what I myself had gleaned about sexuality and gender in my time on Earth up until 5th grade. And those memories go to 1st grade, because that's when some of these feelings start, and seeing cute boys. And I remember kissing this boy on the lips in the middle of class in 1st grade, and no mention was ever made of it. I remember we also used to play a game where we would go at recess. We played this game where we'd tackle a boy, and we'd all smother him with kisses, and we'd all laugh about it, and then we'd go back into class. And this was just like 1st grade. But I can tell you, I remember that by 2nd grade, we didn't play any of these games. And I don't remember any specific moment where I was snatched up on my collar and scolded. I think what it was all of us getting about 100,000 little social cues from everyone around us that this behavior wasn't going to fly. Well, I'm not sure when I first heard the word gay, but it probably came from one of those many tests that boys that age like to fling at each other. Hey, Carl, you got something on your shoe. If you lift up your shoe this way, you're straight. If you lift up your shoe this way, you're gay. It's very scientific. So I would pass these tests every once in a while. Most of the time I would fail and people would laugh and jeer, but we'd move on. And I remember sometimes I'd hear the word gay on television. You know, as a family, sometimes we'd be watching sitcoms. There was Three's Company with Jack Tripper pretending to be a gay man so that he could be the roommate with these two girls who needed a roommate, and they were only allowed to have, and he was only allowed to room with them if he was gay. There was also Bosom Buddies. That was two men who dressed up as women because their apartment got demolished and they had to move into an all-women's dorm because that's where it had cheap rent. So from TV, there was really nothing to learn about being gay, but the takeaway was that in cities across America, rent was sky high. But if you flip to the news, you would see gay equals AIDS, and that was 1985, and it was terrifying. And it wasn't until I got a little older that I learned the proper form of that equation, which was all that silence equaled death for many people who are just a few years older than me. And sitting in the library, I also remembered back at the summer after third grade, when my older brother came home, excitedly brought me up to the living room, sat me down on the carpet, and in hushed tones, proceeded to explain to me everything about the birds and the bees, and all the ins and outs of intercourse, which he had just learned at his Saturday CCD class. See, the CCD teachers were smart. They didn't send home permission slips with the students. They just knew that sex ed was going to be one of the afternoons on their curriculum, and my brother was bursting to tell me what he just learned. So that's the plot twist. Even though my parents opted me out of the class, I learned this stuff way back in third grade. Now, I can't say it was so horrible. Would the family life class really have taught me that much about where my family life was going to go, with a picture on the cover of the man and his wife and the two kids in their preppy outfit? I needed the alternate version that had the two guys holding hands, dressed really fierce, one of them holding their pet Pekingese. That's the family life that I headed towards. And I think that those are some of the images that, you know, places like Florida are trying to take out of the classroom. I mean, don't say gay. Like, really. Don't say gay. Okay, let's see how that works out. You're about to find out how this new generation of queer kids really is. And Florida, you're not ready for it. I'm sorry. Florida, you are not. So I think what I wasn't realizing that I was learning at that time is that my parents weren't really necessarily going to be destined to teach me everything I needed to know about life. And that is its own lesson to learn. I mean, I've never become a parent, and I can't imagine there's some of you here. I'm talking to a room, I'm sure, with people with parents, some of you with young kids that you were dealing with during a pandemic, or some of you with kids who are older now. I can't even imagine it. I can't imagine what it's like to navigate all the things about teaching kids about sexuality in the 2020s. I will say that my parents didn't have, you know, that gay friend in their life. And I think for everybody who's confused or finding it hard, I hope you do have a gay or lesbian or trans person in your life. And because you live in New Jersey, if you don't have that, take the kids to Drag Queen Story Hour while you still can.
All right, keep it going for Carl. Thank you, Carl. I can confirm, I hang out with teenagers all day. They are fierce, and they are ready. I know New Jersey's a bit of a bubble, right? This tri-state area can feel a little bit isolated in that way, but they are all going to college in the South and other places, and they're gonna bring it, and I'm very excited for what they're gonna bring. It's gonna be wonderful to see how it goes. All right, we are at our last official slated storyteller. Let's give it up for Claire Donahue. Come on up, Claire, and as she's coming up and you're giving it a riotous round of applause, hopefully that hand will keep going after she's done. Welcome, Claire.
I'm a teacher. I'm not used to microphones. I'm used to my teacher voice, but we'll see how this goes. So every year, right around this time, I think of one of my favorite former administrators, Dr. Nadine Stein. And I think of her because I can see her in our cafeteria at Northeast Elementary School as she's leading our faculty meeting, saying, "This is it. This is the hard part. September gets all the glory, but May is the worst. The paperwork is mountains high. All you want to do is enjoy your kids, and we make it nearly impossible. So y'all make your list, check it off, enjoy these kids. The end is near. We're gonna make it." The minute I walked into Northeast, I felt grateful to be a part of Dr. Stein's team. I knew walking up and down those halls that she carefully filled classrooms with people who fit her vision. She had high standards for teachers, for paraprofessionals, for kids. She also provided all of us with a lot of support and genuine love for the people in her life and in her halls. This became immediately apparent to me when she was explaining that my evaluator, my first year there, was going to be my department head. I teach English as a second language, and we had our own department head, Ann Feldman, who was also incredible. And Ann would be coming to do my observations and my evaluation. However, Dr. Stein had a policy for herself that if someone from outside of her building was coming in to watch one of her teachers, she was going to be there too. Because she was going to make sure that no one was able to say something about one of her staff members without knowing the truth for herself. As this was explained to me, all I could think of in my head was, wow, you're a badass. You somehow have time to get all of your observations done and everybody else's too? Who is this woman? What is her secret? I was completely stunned. Northeast was the second stop on my career of teaching. I had left Boston Public Schools because I decided I needed a change after about 3 years, and I was really happy to walk through the halls of Northeast. Nadine would only be my principal for 2 years. Shortly after that, she was promoted to be the department head of special education. I made sure to stop by her office shortly before the end of the school year because I needed her to know that when she hired me, I was a little bit lost. My confidence had been shaken, and I suddenly was not sure if this job, which was the only job I had ever wanted to do, was anything that I was good at. And that slowly, bit by bit, in her building, I gained that confidence back, and I felt like I knew what I was doing. And as I told her this, she had to suppress a laugh and finally said, "Claire, you lost your confidence? That is shocking news to me, and I will take the credit if you're going to offer it, but really, you're selling yourself a little short here." Naturally, the person who came to fill Dr. Stein's shoes did not exactly fit the caliber of what we were used to. Honest to God, I think Mother Teresa could have taken that office and we all still would have had an issue. It just didn't work out. We were a little bit heartbroken. And that, for me, was okay, because I was struggling at the same time, debating if I wanted to stay in Massachusetts or if I was ready to come home to New Jersey. And after 2 more years, I decided that I was ready to come home to Jersey. But as I said, I did not have the same warm, positive relationship with my building principal at the time, so I decided to email Dr. Stein and see if I could talk with her about being a reference as I started the job search. I met her actually in the parking lot on her way into her office at about 7:30 one morning. And she said, "Claire, it's so good to see you. What's this about?" I had been panic nervous about talking to her. One of the things that Dr. Stein had done as she became the head of special education was she advocated for myself and a few other colleagues to be trained in this reading program. And there was a piece of me that thought that she was going to see me asking her for a reference as taking this training and running. And I didn't want her to feel that way. So I timidly looked over my shoulder and said to her, "Well, you see, I've decided to move back home to New Jersey." And she automatically goes, "That's wonderful!" She kept walking, and I stopped dead. And after about 3 or 4 steps, she turned back and realized I wasn't with her and went, "Oh, okay, we'll talk about it inside. Come on with me. So we go into her office, and she looks at me, and she goes, did you actually think I'd be upset? And I explained what I'd been thinking about the reading program, and she went, Claire, have you helped a child at Northeast with this reading training? And I said, well, yes, of course. She said, well, money well spent. But more importantly, and I need you to hear me when I say this, Claire, I know you through this one piece of your life. And it's a big one. And Claire, for you, I think it's a really big one. I think teaching is like a part of your identity in a way that it isn't for everyone. So it's a big piece, but Claire, it's not the only one. And in the kaleidoscope of your life, other things are gonna shift. You have goals, you have dreams, you have family obligations, you may have health things come up that have nothing to do with me. I learned a long time ago not to take any of this personally. And all I can do is be happy that you're living your life. And at that point, she paused because I was really trying to control the tears that were suddenly streaming out of my face from nowhere. And she looked at me and said, give me a hug, go to work. And I was immensely grateful again this year to have had that conversation as a friend of mine came to me saying that she was going to be leaving, and I had the perfect words to say to her. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Claire. Let's keep it going for Claire. Let's keep it going for all of our storytellers so far. Thank you so much. And keep it going for all those teachers. All right. If you have been moved, we would love 1 or 2 volunteers, if our group feels it, who would like to share a story. I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to give you a second. And I hope that there will be so many hands when I open my eyes, but there, alas, are not. And that's okay, too. Is there a finger pointing? Hey, what's your name, sir? Ryan Moore. Ryan Moore. Come on, let's give it up for Ryan Moore. All right.
All right, I'm really going to wing this because I did not prepare anything. But this story is about a really dumb, idiot, stupid guy, and that's me. So this story, I do teach. I teach film, I teach screenwriting, but this isn't a story about me teaching. This is a story about me as a student and a teacher that had a lot of mercy on me and gave me a C when I did not deserve a C. It's also the story about the stupidest essay I've ever written. So I took a photography class. It was my freshman year of college, so I was 18, prime stupid age, at least for me it was. And the first assignment was to go to a photo show, and there was, I think it was at, what's that place in Fairfield? This isn't a good story, thinking about places. So I went to a place in Fairfield, and I was told to, critique the photos. So we got a rubric, and the rubric had all this stuff laid out. And I remember for some reason I got drawn to the part where it said, just write about the experience as a whole. What kind of food did they have there? Was there wine? And fixate on the framing, fixate on the frames that the photos are in. I was like, that's interesting. And then I promptly forgot to bring the rubric with me, drove to the place with my little notepad, and I'm walking around, I'm looking at the pictures, and I'm going, oh, okay. And then I'm like, oh, what's the cheddar cheese, I think. And I turned to the guy next to me, is this cheddar cheese, you think? I need to know for class. And he's like, I don't know. It's like, this one's Munster. I know Munster. So, and then I'm looking at the picture frames, and I'm like, they're all the same. They're all black. I wonder what that means. It must mean something. So I'm taking all these notes, and then I'm like, oh, it's the experience as a whole. I better talk to someone. So I see an older man, and he's got his vet hat on, and I was like, oh, were you in the war? And he goes, I was in Vietnam. I was like, tell me about that. So I'm taking all these notes, and I'm writing almost nothing about the actual photos. And then I start typing my essay. I don't look at the rubric again. And I'm typing up the essay, and I'm writing all this really dumb stuff. I'm just writing there was cheddar cheese. There was also Munster cheese. There was wine, but I didn't have any. I'm 18. That would be wrong. I met a man. He had a vet hat on. He hunted pigs in Hawaii with his platoon. Still remember that. So I finished writing this glorious essay, and I hand it in, and I get the essay back a week later with the rubric stapled to the front, big red letters say, "Don't forget to read the rubric." And then circled is the bottom, where now I rereading it, see it says, "Don't just talk about the experience as a whole. Don't fixate on the picture frames. Just write about the photos." And for some reason, he gave me a C. I still don't know why. I don't think I would have given myself a C. So thank you to that teacher for having some mercy. That's my story.
All right, give it up for Ryan Moore. So good. Impromptu storytelling. Rubrics matter. And red pens work. That is what I will leave us with. Last chance, last call. No pressure. You can't volunteer somebody else. Is that a hand? Is that a... Yes? What's your name? Maggie. Come on up, Maggie. Let's give it up for Maggie. Got a 6-minute final story to put us in the running. Thank you, Maggie. Appreciate your bravery and stepping up.
I don't know if it's bravery. It's more my family pressuring me.
All right, that works too.
I'm going to start this story with the 2 words that have been burned in my brain. And it's everywhere. So for the past 20 years, I've been a preschool teacher. So I'm going to apologize for my language right now because I feel like all teachers, once you get out of school, you flip that switch and you're like, I don't have to be proper anymore. I can just curse and do whatever I want. I'm no longer a preschool teacher. I'm now an associate director of the school that I was a teacher at. But there was one memory of a child that really just burned in my brain. Because I never started off thinking I was going to be a preschool teacher. I started college, I was in fashion, I was in business, and I was gonna be this, high-paid, live in the city girl, and that didn't work. Because as a side job, I worked at a preschool. I had a best friend, and her mother was a director, and I needed a summer job. And I just fell in love with the kids. So I switched my major to education and became a preschool teacher. And so as a preschool teacher, you have all these kids, and kids do a lot of dumb shit. They do. Love it, absolutely love it. Because I love a job that I can go to every day and laugh. It's great. So there was one year, I was in class. I was in my classroom. I had a class of about 21 kids, and it was nap time. So all the kids were asleep, except for one. And I'm not going to say his name. We're going to call him Timmy. Timmy had to use the bathroom. And so in the classroom, there's a bathroom. Okay, Timmy, go ahead, go use the bathroom. And I'm the only teacher in there at the time. I was the lead teacher, but my assistants, they're on their lunch break. And I'm sitting there on my laptop and making lesson plans and going about my day. And I noticed Timmy's in there for quite some time. So I kind of fall out a little bit. I said, Timmy, you all right? And Timmy responds, "It's everywhere." In my head, I thought, shit. So I walk in, and that's what it was. It was shit. And it was everywhere. It was on the walls. It was on the toilet seat. It was in his hair. Somehow it ended up on his eyebrow and his face. And all you could do is just walk in and say, what happened? But I don't do well with these things. So when I walked in, and you never want to shame a child or anything like that, but I had to turn my back a little bit because I started to dry heave. Okay, so I look in and I immediately turn around. I'm just like, oh God. Okay, I said, Timmy, what happened here? And he goes, it's just everywhere. I said, no, I see that, honey. You're right, it's everywhere. And so at this point, I'm like, I need another adult. I need another adult. Luckily, one of my assistant teachers comes back from her lunch break. And she's just as bad as me with the the shit everywhere. So I was like, I need a break. And there's an emergency exit in every classroom that leads to like our play area. So I went and I stepped outside to take a breath, and she walks in and she starts to do the same thing. She's like, oh my God. And so we're literally taking turns trying to clean this child up and then running to the emergency exit so that we don't throw up. Because in my head, I'm like, I'm gonna go from this bathroom to the back door and I'm gonna throw up on another child. It's gonna be a problem. There's gonna be a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls. So we call the baby room, like, you know, the infants, they always have like body wash, because, you know, infants, of course, they need to get cleaned up sometime. And we had to literally strip this child down and wash him in the sink. We had to wash his hair, it was under his fingernails. I don't even know what happened. It's almost like he went to wipe his ass, dropped the toilet tissue, thought about it, sweated, and was just like, oh, God. So it was really something. So we got him all cleaned up, and I called his mother, and I said, you know, Timmy, he's not feeling well, he's sick, you need to come pick him up. So she comes, she picks him up, and she drops him off the next morning, bright and early. I said, no, we have a rule here. If he's sick, no, this is too soon. And she goes, oh, no, he wasn't sick. I just gave him a whole bowl of strawberries to eat for breakfast. I said, oh, okay. Lesson learned, ma'am. Maybe give him some cereal or oatmeal, maybe a banana. So we let him back in, and what I learned from all of that is that everyone always told me, you know, as a preschool teacher, you have to have a lot of patience. And I did. And even in the worst moments, when a child is covered in shit, you take care of them. And you make them feel like they're the best kid in the world and everything's gonna be okay. So that's what I learned. That's my story.
All right, let's keep it going for Maggie and poor little Timmy. All right, you have been an incredible audience. We're gonna open the bar back up. Our judges are gonna head upstairs and deliberate. Please help yourself, grab a snack, grab a drink. In about 10 minutes, we're gonna talk about some winners and give out some swag. Thanks, everyone. See you soon. And we're gonna have our judges come on up. Marie, you're gonna go first. All right, I'm gonna pass it over to Marie to announce our third place winner, yes? All right, here you go.
So I get the honor of announcing third place. So in third place is Brooke Hoover. Oh, okay. Show the bag.
Thank you.
So I too took home ec in high school. And funny story, the only class in my entire 4 years of high school, perfect attendance. So, Mrs. Stanley. Anyway, the dress is lovely, the story's great. Deb, glad you found your way to the performing arts. You are tonight's runner-up. Congratulations, well done. Where are you? There you are. Oh, and you get this, and you can tell my judging is finely tuned. I'm doing such a great job.
And then to follow on your lead, Joel, I too had a child who had lots of brilliance, but also special challenges, who overcame them. And in that spirit, the number one winner is, I'm opening this so I don't mispronounce, Delaney Roeder.
All right, bring it in and in the light, please. If we could slide it down this way. Thank you so much. Towards the beautiful Jennifer on the end. Beautiful. Swags up. All right, we got it. One more round of applause for all of our storytellers. Let's keep it going for our 3 judges tonight. Thank you so much. What a great night of community building. Tons of classes this summer. Check out montclairfilm.org. We'll pause on Story Slams, but we'll be back in the fall with more slams. Thanks for coming. Have a great night. Get home safe. Take care.